Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to say a huge thank you for all the support. We've reached over 700 subscribers. I couldn't have done it without you. Now get ready to get spooked. This is how I divorced my wife, my now ex-wife, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved. I didn't see it coming, not at first, but looking back, the signs were there, hidden in the cracks of our marriage that I was too blind to see. It all started on that trip to the woods, the one I thought would save us. Instead, it nearly killed me. I thought the trip would be good for us. I really did. I'd been having these nagging doubts for months now, ever since she started acting different, distant, but I loved her so damn much that I figured if we just got away, just the two of us, maybe we could fix things. Maybe we could go back to how we were before. That's why I suggested we head out to the woods. We used to hike a lot, back when things were still good between us. There's something about being out in nature, away from the noise and chaos of the city, that just clears your head, gives you space to think, to talk. I figured we could use that time to sort things out, maybe even have that tough conversation I'd been avoiding, about how I'd been feeling, about whether she was really in this marriage for the right reasons. But now, as I lie here, bleeding and broken at the bottom of this goddamn ditch, I realize just how wrong I was. It all happened so fast. One minute, we were walking along the trail, chatting about nothing in particular, and the next, I was falling. She was right behind me, then suddenly the ground beneath my feet gave way and I went tumbling down this steep rocky slope. I hit the bottom hard and everything went black for a while. When I came to, she was kneeling beside me, her face a mask of concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine fear. "I think so," I mumbled, my head spinning, vision blurred. What the hell happened? "The ground just slipped away," she said, glancing up the slope. "It must have been all the rain recently. The soil's so loose." I believed her at first. Why wouldn't I? My head was pounding and I was in too much pain to think straight. My leg felt like it was on fire and there was a dull, throbbing ache in my side that made it hard to breathe. I didn't even notice the blood dripping from the gash on my forehead until she started wiping it away with the sleeve of her jacket. "Let's get you out of here," she said, no, trying to help me sit up. I winced as a sharp pain shot through my ribs, but I gritted my teeth and let her pull me to my feet. We struggled back to the trail, me leaning on her heavily, my vision still swimming. I could barely walk, every step sending jolts of agony through my body. But she was calm, focused, keeping her arm around me, guiding me like she always had, like the woman I married. "Just a little further," she kept saying. "We'll find a place to set up camp and you can rest." That's when I started noticing things weren't right. It was small stuff at first. The way she kept glancing over her shoulder like she was worried someone might see us. The way she kept telling me to stay quiet, as if we were in some kind of danger. But I was too out of it to think much about it. My head was killing me, and I was just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, trying not to pass out again. We finally found a flat spot, not far from where I'd fallen, and she helped me down onto the ground. I could barely move by then. My leg was swelling up badly, and every breath felt like I was getting stabbed in the chest. She set up the tent and laid out the sleeping bag, her movements quick and efficient, like she'd done this 100 times before. She even found some painkillers in the first aid kit and handed me a couple along with a canteen of water. "You'll be okay," she said, brushing the hair out of my eyes. "Just rest. I'll keep watch tonight." I was in too much pain to argue, so I nodded and laid back, trying to get comfortable. But as the night wore on, the pain didn't let up. It got worse. My head throbbed, and I started feeling nauseous, the world spinning around me even though I was lying still. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of light, like someone was shining a flashlight right in my face, and through it all, I could feel her watching me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, and there she'd be, sitting by the fire, her eyes fixed on me with this strange look on her face. I thought she was just worried, maybe even scared, but now I wonder if it was something else, something darker. Morning came, and I felt even worse. The pain in my leg had spread, and I could barely move without groaning in agony. She helped me sit up, fed me some more painkillers, and tried to make me eat, but I couldn't keep anything down. I kept telling her we needed to get back to the car, that I needed to see a doctor, but she kept putting me off. "It's too far," she said. "You're in no condition to hike all the way back. We need to wait until you're stronger." But I wasn't getting stronger. I was getting weaker by the hour, and I knew it. That's when the doubts started creeping in, whispering in the back of my mind. Why weren't we trying to get help? Why wasn't she more worried? Why did she keep glancing around like she was waiting for something or someone? But I pushed those thoughts aside. She was my wife. She loved me. We were in this together. Then, on the third day, I woke up to find her gone. Her pack was missing, and there was no sign of her anywhere. I panicked, thinking something had happened to her, that she'd gone off to find help and gotten lost or hurt. But then I saw it, her footprints leading away from the camp, down the trail in the opposite direction from where the car was parked. She left me. I couldn't believe it at first. I refused to believe it. I kept telling myself she'd gone to find help, that she'd be back any minute with a rescue team, that this was all some horrible mistake. But as the hours passed and the sun started to set, the truth became impossible to ignore. She'd abandoned me, left me to die out here in the middle of nowhere with no food, no water, and no way to get out on my own. That's when everything started to fall into place. The way she'd pushed me to take this trip, how she'd insisted we go to this particular spot, far from any other hikers. How she'd been so calm after the fall, like she'd expected it to happen. How she'd kept me drugged and helpless, feeding me just enough painkillers to keep me from thinking straight. It wasn't an accident. She pushed me. She waited until we were alone, until there was no one around to see, and then she pushed me, and I'd been too blind, too stupid to see it. I don't know how long I lay there in shock as the realization sank in. I felt like my whole world had just shattered, like everything I thought I knew had been a lie. I loved her, I trusted her, and she'd been planning to kill me this whole time. But why? That question gnawed at me, even as I lay there, too weak to move, too weak to do anything but wait for death. Why would she do this? Why would she want me dead? The answer came to me in a flash, as sudden and painful as a knife to the heart. Money. It was always about money. I'd been stupid not to see it sooner. I was wealthy, and she knew that. Maybe that's why she married me in the first place. Maybe she was just waiting for the right moment, the right excuse to get rid of me and take everything I had. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe she was tired of me, tired of the marriage, and didn't want to deal with the hassle of a divorce. Maybe she thought this would be easier, cleaner. Who would suspect her? After all, accidents happen in the woods all the time. People fall, people get lost, and sometimes people die. But she didn't count on me surviving. She didn't count on me figuring it out. I don't know how I made it through that night. The pain was unbearable, and I was so weak I could barely lift my head, but something inside me refused to give up. I wasn't gonna die out here, not like this, not after everything. I don't remember much about that night, just flashes of pain and fear, the cold seeping into my bones as the fire died down, the darkness pressing in on all sides. I kept hearing noises in the woods, rustling in the underbrush, branches snapping. I thought it was her at first, coming back to finish the job, but it wasn't. It was something else, something that stayed just out of sight, watching, waiting. By morning, I knew I had to move. If I stayed there, I'd either die from my injuries or from the elements. I didn't have much strength left, but I managed to drag myself up, using a tree for support. My leg was swollen and throbbing, and each step felt like stepping on hot coals. The pain was relentless, but the thought of being left alone out here, abandoned and betrayed, pushed me forward. I followed the trail of her footprints, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd come back. I was delusional, but hope can be a powerful motivator, even when it's as fragile as a spider's web. The deeper I went into the woods, the more I realized how dire my situation was. I had no food, no water, and barely any strength. My vision was blurring more often, and I struggled to keep moving. Hours passed, and the forest seemed endless. It was like being trapped in a maze where every turn led to more trees, more underbrush. I started feeling disoriented again, the pain and exhaustion making it hard to think clearly. The sounds of the forest became a distorted symphony. Leaves rustling, birds calling, the distant rumble of a stream. But none of it mattered. I had to keep going, had to find a way out. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, I heard a voice. A distant, muffled voice that cut through the fog in my mind. I forced myself to follow it, stumbling and almost falling several times. The voice grew louder, clearer, until I finally emerged from the dense forest and saw a small group of hikers. They were just about to set up camp, and their faces lit up with shock and concern when they saw me. "Help!" I croaked, collapsing at their feet. "Please, help me!" They rushed to my side, offering water and first aid. They were shocked by my condition and quickly called for emergency services. As they tended to my injuries, I couldn't stop thinking about her. What would I say when the authorities questioned me? How could I explain that the woman who was supposed to love me tried to kill me? When the rescue team arrived, they took over and I was transported to the nearest hospital. The doctors were amazed I had survived. My injuries were severe, but not life-threatening. They said if I'd stayed out there much longer, I wouldn't have made it. I spent several weeks recovering, physically and mentally. The police investigation into my wife's disappearance was swift. The search party couldn't find her, and there were no clues as to where she had gone. But I knew exactly what she had done. The evidence pointed to foul play, but without a body, the case was difficult to prove. I was left to deal with the emotional aftermath and the legal proceedings on my own. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing the woman I had trusted with my life had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I had to face the reality that she was no longer the person I thought I knew. The marriage I had once cherished had become a nightmare, a cruel game she had orchestrated to get what she wanted. As I went through the process of divorcing her, the pain of betrayal was almost as severe as the physical pain from my injuries. I had to relive every moment of that horrific experience, recounting the details to lawyers, detectives, and therapists. It felt like I was being punished for trusting someone who never deserved it. In the end, the divorce was finalized, and I was left with a shattered heart and a fractured trust. The woman I had loved so deeply was gone, not just physically, but from my life. It wasn't just the loss of a partner, it was the loss of a future I had envisioned, a dream that had turned into a nightmare. As I rebuild my life, I'm left with the scars, both physical and emotional. The betrayal cut deep, and the memories of that trip will always haunt me. I've learned to be cautious, to question, and to trust only those who prove themselves worthy. The pain of the past will never fully fade, but I'm determined to move forward, to live a life that's better and more honest than the one I left behind. And though it's a long road to recovery, I'm learning to find solace in the fact that I survived. I survived her attempt to end my life. I survived the betrayal, and now I'm ready to face whatever comes next, stronger and wiser for having faced the worst. You know how sometimes you plan the perfect getaway just to relax and escape the craziness of life? That's exactly what my husband Noah and I had in mind when we decided to spend a week at his family's old cabin. He hadn't been there since he was a kid, and honestly, I was excited to get away from everything. A little time in the woods, no cell service, no work emails, just us. It sounded perfect. The cabin was tucked away in the forests of northern Wisconsin, near a small, almost deserted town. Noah's family hadn't used it in years, but when his uncle passed, Noah inherited it. We figured this was the perfect chance to check it out. The drive up was peaceful, the kind where you can almost feel your stress melting away with each mile. The last stretch was a narrow dirt road lined with tall pines. I remember how we joked about it looking like the road to a horror movie, if only we knew. When we finally pulled up, I was pleasantly surprised. The cabin was small but in pretty good shape. It was clear that someone had taken care of it, even if no one had lived there for a while. It had this rustic charm, dark wood, stone fireplace, a couple of cozy rooms, a little musty, but nothing a few open windows couldn't fix. Noah was grinning ear to ear, showing me around, reminiscing about the times he spent there as a kid. We unpacked, settled in, and spent the first day exploring the surrounding woods. It was beautiful out there. We had a picnic by the lake, tried fishing, which was more us tangling the line than catching anything, and just enjoyed being out in the fresh air. By the time we got back to the cabin, the sun was setting, and the place had this warm, inviting glow. We made dinner, a couple of steaks on the old grill, and ended the night with a bottle of wine by the fire. Everything felt perfect. The next day, we decided to take it easy. We lounged around, reading, playing cards, and just soaking in the silence. But that evening, things started to get a little weird. I was in the kitchen, putting away some of the snacks we'd brought when I noticed that some of the food was missing. Not a lot, just a couple of things. An apple, a pack of crackers, a can of soda. I asked Noah if he'd been snacking, and he swore he hadn't. I didn't think much of it, figuring maybe we'd eaten more than I remembered. Then, later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, we heard it, a soft thud coming from somewhere in the cabin. Noah and I froze, listening. It was quiet for a while, and then we heard it again, like something bumping against the floorboards. Probably just the house settling, Noah said, though he didn't sound convinced. I nodded, pretending not to be bothered, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. The next morning, I was the first to get up. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed the coffee mugs on the counter had moved. I was sure I'd left them on the drying rack. They were now lined up neatly next to the sink. I brushed it off, thinking maybe Noah had moved them for some reason, though it didn't make sense. When he came into the kitchen, I asked him, but he just shrugged. Maybe I did it half asleep, he said, but we both knew that didn't add up. Something about those mugs sent a shiver down my back. Over breakfast, we tried to make light of it, joking about the cabin having a ghost, but there was a tension between us that wasn't there before. We spent the day hiking, trying to distract ourselves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That night, the noises started again. This time, it was more than just thuds. It sounded like scratching, almost like something was moving under the floor. Noah and I sat up in bed, straining to hear. We looked at each other, eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Noah nodded, his face pale in the moonlight. We got up, tiptoeing around the cabin, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The kitchen, the living room, everywhere we went, it felt like the sound was moving, staying just out of reach. We didn't sleep much that night, every creak of the old cabin making us jump. The next morning, I woke up to find more food missing. A couple of slices of bread, a granola bar, and the mugs, they were moved again. This time, they were back on the drying rack, like someone had put them away. My skin prickled with fear. I told Noah, and we decided to check the cabin more thoroughly, thinking maybe some animal had gotten in, though that didn't explain the mugs. We checked the windows, the doors, everything was locked. Nothing seemed out of place, but that didn't explain the noises or the missing food. That night, the sounds got worse. The scratching was louder, and I swore I heard whispering, though Noah said it was just the wind. We lay in bed, every nerve on edge, listening to the house creak and groan. Around midnight, there was a loud bang, like something heavy had fallen. Noah and I bolted up, grabbing the flashlight. We crept out into the living room, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Noah nodded, shining the light around. We couldn't see anything, but the noise was unmistakable. It was coming from below us. We stood still, listening. The scratching started again, louder now, definitely coming from under the floor. Noah went to the corner of the living room and started tapping the floorboards with his foot. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Looking for a loose board," he said. After a minute, his foot hit something hollow. We both froze. "There," he said, crouching down. He found the edge of a floorboard that seemed out of place, a section that didn't match the rest. Noah grabbed a knife from the kitchen and used it to pry up the board. As he lifted it, a dark hole appeared, just big enough for someone to crawl through. We shined the flashlight inside, and that's when we saw it. Clothes, a pillow, and a dirty blanket. There were empty food wrappers, a half-eaten apple, and a few cans of soda, our food. My stomach turned, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone had been living under our floor. "Noah, we need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. He nodded, backing away from the hole. We grabbed our things and bolted out of the cabin, jumping into the car. My hands were trembling so badly I could hardly get the keys in the ignition. We drove down that dirt road, away from the cabin, without looking back. We finally reached the nearest town and found a gas station with a payphone. We called the police and told them everything. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't believe what had happened. Our perfect getaway had turned into a nightmare. We never found out who was living under the floor or how long they'd been there. The police found the makeshift room empty when they arrived, just as we'd left it, with no sign of the person who'd been there. I still get chills thinking about it. Knowing that someone was there the whole time, listening to us, watching us, moving things around, taking our food, Noah and I decided we'd never go back to that cabin again. Some things are better left forgotten. Looking back, I'm just grateful that things didn't take an even more horrifying turn. We're alive, we're safe, and that's what matters. Nobody got hurt, and we got out of there before anything worse could happen. I try not to think about what might have been going on in that person's head, but sometimes I can't help it. What if it wasn't just a homeless person seeking shelter? What if they had more sinister intentions? What if we hadn't noticed the missing food or the moved mugs? I don't even want to imagine what could have happened if we hadn't realized we weren't alone. Trigger warning. This story contains themes of self-harm and thoughts of ending one's life. Viewers' discretion is advised. We'd been lost for days. What was supposed to be a quick training exercise had turned into a nightmare. We were deep in the woods, somewhere far from any trail or sign of civilization. The first day, we thought we could find our way back, retrace our steps, maybe wait out the storm that had hit us hard. But every attempt to return to base only led us deeper into the forest, like the trees were playing tricks on us. 6 of us, me, Jackson, Riley, Cortez, McCoy, and Sergeant Harker, our leader. We tried to stay calm at first, but after the 3rd or 4th day with no end in sight, things started to change. The forest felt different. It wasn't just the rain or the thick underbrush. It was something else, something that got under our skin. Everything was fine, normal, if you could call it that. The forest was thick, but we moved through it easy enough, cracking jokes, checking gear, keeping formation. Just another day at work until that storm came rolling in. I swear it hit out of nowhere. One minute the sky was clear, the next, the clouds came boiling over the treetops, dark and angry. Lightning flashed, and then the rain started. A torrential downpour, like the heavens had opened up. I'd never seen anything like it. The kind of rain that gets you soaked to the bone in seconds, makes everything a mess. At first, we figured we'd ride it out, No big deal, just some bad weather. Harker pulled out the compass, kept us moving north, but after a while, things got weird. The rain didn't stop, hours passed, and the storm didn't let up. The trees, God, the trees, they all looked the same. We should have been out of there, but it was like we were stuck, walking in circles. No matter how far we went, it felt like we weren't getting anywhere. Sarge kept checking the map, then the compass, then the map again. His face was set, but I could tell something was wrong. I think we all felt it. Something was off, and it wasn't just the storm. "Hey, Sarge, we good?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the compass in his hand like it was a busted piece of junk. Finally, he looked up, rain dripping off his nose. "We'll make it. Just keep moving." We kept moving, all right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were lost. Jackson said it first. After maybe the 3rd or 4th time, we passed what looked like the same moss-covered rock. "This isn't right, man. We're going in circles." "Shut up, Jackson," Riley muttered. "You're just spooked. It's the rain." But we all knew he was right. There was this tension building, something crawling under our skin. The deeper we went into that forest, the more it felt like it was closing in on us. And then the whispers started. It wasn't loud, not at first. Just this faint noise in the distance, like wind moving through the trees. Except it wasn't the wind. I caught the first one, just on the edge of a hearing, like someone whispering my name. I stopped dead in my tracks, listening hard, but there was nothing. "McKay, what are you doing?" McCoy snapped. "We ain't got time for this." "I thought I heard something," I said, but I couldn't explain it. Everyone else started hearing them too, though. We'd be walking, trying to focus, and then someone would whip their head around like they'd just heard a voice right behind them. But every time, there was no one there. Just trees. Then things got worse. It was Cortez who cracked first. We were slogging through this swampy part of the forest, rain still coming down in sheets, when he suddenly let out this scream. Not a yell, like a scream, the kind that makes your blood run cold. We all turned and saw him stumbling back, his eyes wide with terror, staring down at his hand. "There's a snake! Get it off! Get it off!" he yelled, swinging his knife around, trying to cut something off his fingers. But there was no snake. Nothing at all. "Cortez, what the hell?" Sarge barked, grabbing his arm. "It's biting me. Can't you see it? It's right there," Cortez screamed, slashing at his own hand, nearly taking his finger off in the process. It took all of us to pin him down, to stop him from hurting himself. Blood was pouring from where he'd sliced his palm, and we wrapped it as best we could, but he kept muttering, "It's still there. It's still there," eyes darting around like he was seeing things none of us could. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong with this place. It wasn't just the storm or being lost. The forest. It was messing with our heads. Over the next few hours, it got to everyone. Jackson became paranoid, kept accusing Riley of leading us the wrong way on purpose, like he was trying to get us killed. They almost came to blows a few times before Sarge stepped in and broke it up, but it wasn't just arguments. McCoy started seeing shadows. He'd stop dead in his tracks and stare into the trees, swearing there was someone or something watching us. He even fired his rifle once into the darkness, convinced he saw something move. Nothing was there. I kept trying to hold it together, but even I started hearing things. Voices, whispers, telling me to run, to leave the others behind. I fought it, but it was like the forest was crawling into my brain, digging up every fear, every dark thought I'd ever buried. The worst part was, we weren't just losing our minds. We were turning on each other. Everyone was so on edge, ready to snap. I saw it in their eyes, the way they looked at each other, like we were all the enemy. Then it happened. We were setting up camp for the night when Riley snapped. He came at Jackson with his knife, no warning, just screaming that Jackson was trying to kill us all. The two of them went at it, rolling in the mud, trying to tear each other apart. The rest of us jumped in, but it was chaos. Mud and fists flying, shouts and screams. In the struggle, Riley stabbed Jackson in the arm, and the blood, God, there was so much blood. We finally pulled them apart, but Jackson was out cold, and Riley, he wasn't making sense anymore, muttering about voices, about how the forest was alive, how it wanted us dead. By that point, I didn't know what to believe. Everything was falling apart. We couldn't stay there another night, but we didn't know how to get out. We were lost, and the forest was driving us insane. Sarge made the call to keep moving even in the dark. He didn't say it, but I could tell he was just as scared as the rest of us. We stumbled through the trees, half carrying Jackson, while Riley kept muttering to himself. And Cortez, well, Cortez wasn't doing much better, still holding his hand like something was gnawing on it. It felt like we walked forever. Every time I heard a twig snap, I thought it was something coming for us, something lurking in the shadows, just waiting to tear us apart. My nerves were shot, and the whispers kept coming, getting louder, more insistent. They sounded like voices I knew, but twisted, mocking, telling me to run, telling me I'd never get out. I don't know how long we pushed through the night. It could have been hours, or maybe it was just minutes stretched out by the madness creeping in. The rain finally let up sometime after dawn, but the damage was done. We were on edge, barely holding it together. That's when McCoy vanished. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. We called his name, searched the nearby brush, but it was like the forest swallowed him whole. I heard him whispering to me, or maybe I just thought I did. By then, I didn't know what was real anymore. Sarge was the only one who kept us moving. I think it was sheer willpower keeping him from breaking down like the rest of us. He didn't say much, just kept glancing at the compass that still didn't make any sense. His face was hard, but I could see the cracks forming. Even he wasn't immune to whatever was happening in that place. Then, by some miracle, we found a clearing. The trees just opened up, and in the distance, we could see a road. A goddamn road. We stumbled toward it, dragging Jackson, who was barely conscious. When our boots hit the pavement, it was like waking up from a nightmare. The whispers stopped, the shadows faded, but the damage was already done. We flagged down a passing truck and made it back to base. There were no debriefings, no long explanations, just the sound of the door closing behind me as I was led to the med tent with the others. Jackson's arm was stitched up. Cortez was treated for his hand, but the real injuries, the ones in our heads, they weren't so easy to fix. I still hear the whispers sometimes. Late at night, when everything's quiet, they come back. Just faint, on the edge of a hearing. I see the shadows too, out of the corner of my eye. I've had doctors tell me it's PTSD, that my brain is playing tricks on me. But I know what I heard, what we all heard. The others didn't make it. Cortez put a gun to his head a few weeks later, said the snake had finally crawled inside him, eating him alive. Riley was committed after he attacked a nurse, swearing she was part of the forest, sent to finish the job. McCoy was never found. And me, I'm here, still breathing. But sometimes I wonder if I ever really left that forest, if part of me is still out there, wandering beneath those twisted trees, lost forever. So, if you ever find yourself out in those woods, and the storm rolls in, and the trees start whispering your name, don't listen, don't turn around. Just keep walking, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll make it out, but don't count on it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this other one filled with even more chilling horror stories. Just click right here. See you in the next one.